Hello BookTube! Welcome to Lizzie Faye Loves Books. I'm Elizabeth, and today I'm going to be showing you some of the books I read during the summer. Now I'm going to be breaking up my summer wrap-up into about 3 different videos to split up the different genres, and today's video is the romance and women's fiction books that I read. I did a separate June wrap-up, and so I'm not going to be talking about the books I read in June. This will just be July and August. One of the books I read for Booktubeathon that falls into this category is The Diary of Mattie Spenser by Sandra Dallas. This follows Mattie Spenser, and we get to read the pages of her diary as she begins her new married life in the year, I think 1866, right after the Civil War, and she gets married and takes her and her husband take a covered wagon across the country, I believe from Iowa to Colorado. This is the story of their lives in Colorado post-Civil War. And it's pretty harsh. It's definitely not sugar-coated. The book is very compelling and is an enjoyable read, but I have to say that in the end, the characters really disappointed me. You know when you read a book and you want the characters to be your heroes, and then they can let you down because really when you think about it, they're human just like we are. So of course they're not going to make perfect choices and they're going to make mistakes. So this is a down-to-earth book, and I would recommend it, but it's not going to be one of my top picks for the year. Another book that disappointed me a little bit, I started reading this right before TBR Takedown 2.0, and I finished it up during that week. This is Love Story by Erich Segal. On the Ultimate Reading Challenge, I had to read a classic romance. I remember my sister dragging me to this movie. It was one of the first movies that I remember watching right about that time, and I've kind of started making the connection that when we were getting ready to see this movie, I remember my mother cautioning me about ugly words and bad words that I should not repeat. And one of the words was BS. And of course, as a young kid, the minute she tells me this is something you don't repeat, I begin trying to figure out how I can work it in a sentence. So, of course, I did, and that experience made me really never want to use bad language again. I think I tried the 4-letter D word 2 more times in junior high, and that was it. That's really, I can count on one hand the number of times I have used a foul word like that, because it just wasn't worth it. My parents are both teachers, and so I couldn't say anything at school that wouldn't get back to them. And I've been a Christian since I was 12, so you know, I haven't really had a desire to use foul language, and I don't really enjoy it in a book. But I can overlook it at times. But I remember this was the book that kind of introduced foul language to me, and it kind of had the reverse effect at first with what my mother was trying to teach me. But this book is full of foul language, so that was a kind of a turnoff. But the other thing I didn't really like about it is how the characters treated each other. They were very harsh and rude, and the characters, Oliver and Jenny, are college students, and they start out just when they first meet, they're just rude to each other. And somehow they can see through that rudeness and fall in love, but they still continue to treat each other rudely. And Oliver doesn't have a good relationship with his parents. He really can't stand his father, and he patronizes his mother, and it's just not, it wasn't really an enjoyable book for me. Now I know the movie back in the 70s was a huge hit. The music was a huge hit, and I kind of wanted to go back and kind of remember what the fuss was about, because in 1970 I was 6. So I didn't remember the specifics about it, but having read it again now as an adult, I really don't see what the fuss was about. Perhaps it was because it was a unique take on a romance, to have the characters be in love but yet treat each other with harshness. Because they treated each other the way they did, it wasn't a gushy, flowery romance. It was a different kind of romance, and maybe that's the appeal that it had. So, I mean, I went into it thinking it was going to kind of be like A Fault in Our Stars, because I knew that, spoiler alert, I knew that one of them was going to die in the end, but it wasn't what I expected it to be. So, all right. So on my Nook, which is not charged right now, so I can't turn it on, I read the first part of a book by Elizabeth Meadows called Love's Journey. I had to read a book for Booktubeathon and also for the Ultimate Reading Challenge, a book written by an author with the same initials. And so I read that book. I bought it for 99 cents on my Nook. Turned out it wasn't the whole book. It was just like the first few chapters. And I liked it though, and I'm looking forward to reading more as soon as it's released. It's about a young woman who suspected that her husband was cheating on her. And as you go through the first few chapters of she's kind of coming to that realization and deciding if she wants to try to win him back or not. And the story leaves off was with a cliffhanger, of course. So I really do want to be able to get the rest of the book when it's released and see what happens next. Another book I read was Debbie Macomber's first book called Heartsong. This was originally published by Silhouette Inspirations in 1984. I read it for the Ultimate Reading Challenge to read a popular author's first book. In this story, Sky Garvin was engaged 8 years prior, and her fiance was killed. So she has gone through the 8 years leading up to this story, not really opening herself up to another relationship, and has just kind of buried herself in work. She's a kindergarten teacher and a hospital volunteer. She plays the piano for the hospital. She plays the piano like for the kids area and does entertainment for the children's wing of the hospital. She's a soloist in the church choir and is very involved in a lot of things. She meets a patient at the hospital while she's volunteering that she ends up helping, and they eventually start dating, and then she finds out he's really not who he claims to be. There are some twists and turns along the way, and I really did enjoy it. I thought it was a good book, especially considering that this was a first book by an author. I thought it was very good. Then probably the best book I read over the summer in this category is Christy by Catherine Marshall. This was published in 1968. I had not heard of this until 1994 when I saw the TV movie adaptation starring Kelly Martin and Tyne Daly, and that made me want to read the book, but I didn't get around to it until now. I have had this copy sitting on my shelf for a year or two, and I had originally tried to see if I had checked to see if my library had it on audiobook, because it is quite a lengthy book. It's over 500 pages, but I finally just decided that I was going to get around to reading it. In the Ultimate Reading Challenge, I had to read a book that was over 500 pages, and since it had been on my shelf a while, I read it for the TBR Takedown. I had actually already started it before TBR Takedown, and I finished it during that week. So it's a very good book. This is the story of 19-year-old Christy Huddleston, who decides to teach in a mission school in the Great Smoky Mountains. And she goes there, she gets as close as she can by train, and then she has to walk several miles with the postman to get back into the backwoods where she's going to be teaching, where she finds they have a mission house built and a school slash church building. There are about 60 students that come from the mountains around to her class from all age groups, and it is the story of the challenges and the culture shock of her getting to know these families and forming relationships with these families, as well as the minister there and the doctor and the other people that she comes in contact with. And it's really, really a heartwarming story. It's right up there with like the Little House on the Prairie books, except that this is written for adults. I believe that the character of Christy is based on Catherine Marshall's real mother, who told her the stories as she was growing up, and then eventually Catherine decided to write her mother's story and then embellish it and fictionalize it to make the book that we have today. So later on, after the TV movie, I want to say that there was a series, I believe there was a TV series or maybe another series of movies that was based on this, and it's really a wonderful book. It was very heartwarming, very enjoyable. Again, it's there are some harsh moments and some gritty moments, but I especially like that there's no bad language, and that it's just a really good, compelling story to read. So I think that's it for the romance and women's fiction that I read over the summer. I will be back with some of the other books that I read over the summer in another video. So have a great day, read a good book, and God bless you.